Does being happy on the job matter? Well, of course it does. In fact, the Gallup organization estimates 22 million Americans are unhappy on the job, reducing their productivity, increasing their absenteeism to the tune of $350 billion a year. A former Ontario Provincial Police Commissioner thinks better leadership could go a long way towards making employees happier and our economy firing on more cylinders. He lays out the case in Never Stop on a Hill, Transferrable Lessons in Leadership from the Eyes of a Police Chief. And former Commissioner Chris Lewis joins us now with more. Chris, good to see you again.
Good
Welcome
to see
back
you,
to
Steve.
TVO.
Thank you.
All right, my first question is going to be a bit chippy here, but even by your own estimation, there have been 20,000 books written about leadership. So what made you think you had anything to add beyond that?
Well, you know, I've been studying leadership all my life, just as an observer, a people person, someone that watches people through research and watching leaders succeed and fail all around me. And learning valuable lessons from that and from my own mistakes, and realizing overall the impact bad leadership and good leadership have on people. And it's all about people. Rick Hillier said that, I think it's one of the opening lines in his book on leadership. Yeah, one of the 20,000 books out there, obviously, but it's all about people. And it's about inspiring them to be their best and do their best and feel connected to the organization as they work with you to try and carry out their organizational goals.
Why would leadership still be such a problem, given that we have it taught in universities, we have 20,000 books at it, we have institutes devoted to its better understanding in society, and yet we still apparently stink at it? How come?
Well, because it's about people, and people are humans, and people make mistakes. But I think an organization's culture can be so driven downhill or uphill by leadership. And if there's chinks in the armor below whoever's in charge, things are still going to go bad in some places.
Well, there's that word hill that you just, and it's in the title of the book, so I should ask you about that right now, because it's a story that deals with your daughter. Never Stop on a Hill. What's that about?
Well, my daughter, who's now a second lieutenant in the Royal Canadian Air Force, which she started at age 34, walked away from an engineering career. When she was very young, she used to jog with me. She had her little Olivia Newton-John headband, I used to say, in her little ponytail, and she'd stretch and go through all the exercises. And whenever we came to a little hill initially, she'd want to stop and walk. Let's walk up the hill, Daddy. And I'd said, honey, don't let the hill beat you. Thinking then that life is a series of hills and valleys. And if we stop on them, we're not going to survive. And so that became a thing with her and I, and it is to this day. And she actually did the first independent read of my book for me, and come back with 1,000 things wrong with it. But all that being said, she's faced her own challenges in her life, career challenges, marital challenges, etc. And I've really watched her with pride, and my other daughter as well, overcome those things and move forward. And leadership is like that.
I like your daughter because she said when you urged her to be more easy and open with people, what was her response to you? Do you remember?
Words don't fly out of my bum like they do out of yours, Dad. And she wasn't quite that polite. Yeah.
No, she didn't say bum.
No, she didn't.
Here's an excerpt from the book. Too many people, albeit many of them capable and intelligent, are so focused on their own careers, therefore making every decision with a view towards what's in it for them. Actually, leading people is the least of their concerns. Their clawing and clamoring for promotion far outweighs their desire to build morale, support their people, and encourage them to be the best they can be. Much of that is a learned behavior, learned from piss-poor leaders that they have watched succeed through tyranny, oppression, and backstabbing. If there is so much of this kind of poor leadership around and everybody hates it, why do so many people get away with it?
Because those below them are afraid to take them on. They see it as a career ender if they challenge the boss. I mean, I sat in meetings over the years, without pointing a finger at any specific leader, but I sat at a member of committees and meetings where leaders would say, so what do you think? Here's my idea. And someone would put their hand up and say, wonderful idea, I love you, it's a great idea. And someone else is saying, I'm not so sure. Now you get the death stare because you didn't necessarily agree with the leader. How does that inspire anyone to think on their own? It's like, okay, I want to know your opinion, but it better agree with my opinion. And that's not leadership. And how do you take that on? So some people learn from that. They see those fail because they did take it on, respectfully as it may have been, and they see others succeed who said, yes, great idea, I love you, you're so smart, you're wonderful.
Where are you on the idea of whether leaders are forged or born?
I think there's a combination thereof. I think some people are born with natural communication ability and people skills that are very innate to them. And not everybody's comfortable sitting down and talking face to face with an employee who's having a tough time, needs help, needs to be disciplined, or has a kid dying of cancer. And you face all of that in leadership roles. Right. Not everybody's comfortable with that, but you can work on that and you can improve that. Some people aren't born with any leadership skills. They hate people. They're never going to develop. So is it a born or is it a made type of or learned skill? I think it's a combination thereof. Some people are very fortunate and some never will be.
Is it a fatal flaw for a leader ever to cry in front of his or her subordinates?
If it's a flaw, then I screwed up many times.
Because you have done that.
I've done it. You know, and there was an article written about it at one point in the Sun over an article or a message I sent out broadly in the OPP to talk about the death of Vu Pham and how I sat in the car after and bawled my eyes out. I could cry right now thinking about Vu Pham and his family.
Tell the story.
Well, Vu Pham was a young kid who came here at the end of the Vietnam War and was adopted by a non-Vietnamese family and raised and met the love of his life in church and had 3 wonderful boys who I'm still in touch with the family. And he was shot and killed.
What city?
Down around Wingham, just outside of Wingham in Huron County. And Julian Fantina was the commissioner, I was the deputy. We were there when he died, with his family when he died at the hospital in London. And I cried then, not in front of the kids, but after. But, you know, I knew our people were hurting, so I sent a message out to say, I know you're hurting, I'm hurting too. I didn't want them to hold back from expressing their grief and their sadness. And I wanted them to see that I'm not afraid to admit I cried. I sat on the side of the road after that funeral and bawled my eyes out. So does that make me a weak leader? A police chief of a very prominent city in this province at the time told me that article would come out. You kind of put yourself out there, you know, there's danger in that. I said, are people going to think I'm a sucky baby? I guess I am. I don't care.
Is there a double standard, though? I get the feeling that men are allowed to cry in public in a way that women are not, because you'll be seen as sensitive and in touch with the troops. A woman leader, conversely, might be seen as too soft and not up to the job. That's there, you know.
Well, and that what may well be. My wife's the chief superintendent in the OPP, and I mean, she cries all the time. Cried recently when a good friend died. I think some would use that, some who, without any proper intent at all, would use that against some women just to say, look, she's weak, she cried. Where the reality is we're all human beings, we all cry, we all have emotions, and I think it takes more strength to be honest with that and show that than it does to try and hide it because you're worried someone's going to think you're not a strong person. It's like PTSD, you know, if you got into that discussion. It takes more strength sometimes to come forward and admit you need help than it does to hide in the shadows.
Try to power through.
That's right.
Can we do a little play acting here?
Sure.
You're the boss. I'm a subordinate. We've been longtime friends from before the time you were the boss. You think I'm taking advantage of that and therefore putting in a subpar performance. So you call me into your office in an attempt to get me to pick up my game. How do you do it?
I'd say, Steve, you know, you and I have been friends for a long time. There's not very many people in this organization that know you better than I. Through good times and in bad, you know, you're one of my best friends and you're one of the best employees we've ever had in this organization. But that's changed of late. I don't know what's going on. You know, or as some would suggest, you're trying to take advantage of our relationship. I don't believe that to be true, but you know what? If there's any sort of semblance of that, we need to deal with it. Because perception becomes reality, you know, and people are watching you and they're watching me.
Oh, come on, Chris. And I'm not going to call you a commissioner as I should because you're my superior. Come on, Chris. We've known each other too long for you to hand me this line of crap. Come on, we're okay, right? We're solid.
That works 2 ways, my friend. I'll always be there for you if you're doing the right things for the right reasons. If you're not, I have to take you on just like everybody else. And that's the reality of it.
Chris, really? I thought we were buds, pal.
Yeah, we are. We always will be. But you know what? We still have a relationship here professionally that we have to work through.
Okay, has that ever happened?
Oh, it has happened.
And how does it usually work out when you try that?
Well, initially, and I talk about it in the book, one of my early experiences as a new corporal was with a very close friend. And I was thinking of him, I was talking to you, and he's one of my best friends to this day, but he went through a period, like we all do, where things started to slip. And it wasn't because of a relationship with me. That bothered me, that piece of it, more than he even thought about it. But I needed to talk to him, and I couldn't do it because he was my friend. And we'd been through awful things together, including shootings. And I just thought the world of the guy. I'm godfather to his oldest son. But he was slipping downhill for other reasons in his life. And having that tough conversation with him was difficult for me. And I put it off so long, I failed him. But the conversation went well. It was hard on us both, and he rose to a high rank in the organization, and everyone to this day will say he's one of the best bosses they ever had.
Interesting.
So did that help? I hope so, because I failed him at the front end of that.
I never knew this about you until I read the book. You had a brain tumor 17 years ago. You had surgery. What did you learn at the time? Obviously, you got through it. Here you are today.
I survived it,
Thank goodness.
Yes.
What did you learn then about who you could count on and who you couldn't count on?
Well, I learned a lot about resilience from a personal perspective, because it would have been easy to fold my tent then and cave in and cry myself to sleep at night, and I did sometimes. But I learned a lot. From friends, I saw friends, leaders that I thought would be there for me that weren't. I had a deputy commissioner, Morris Pilon, who's long retired now, who sat in the hospital with my mom and dad, who'd already buried his son, while their oldest son's going through brain surgery. And I'll never forget that he did that. I learned from that myself. I probably would have done it without seeing him do it first, but it was great that he did that. I saw other friends and other leaders that I was really closer to that never even called me. So, you know, some of that's human nature, and some people aren't comfortable having those tough conversations.
You ever circle back with those people who weren't there for you and find out why?
No, I never put it to them that way. I remember calling out to one who had just split with his wife a year or two later and saying, hey, if you need anything, I'm here for you. And he said, you know what, just hearing your voice means a lot, and I feel bad that I haven't called you a few times over through the years as well. So
message delivered in some respects,
I didn't have to say it. He totally got it, yeah.
Here's another excerpt from the book. I think that many leaders, far too many, are afraid to make decisions because they don't want to take any risks out of fear that an error will jeopardize their careers. Instead, they risk their careers by not making decisions. How does someone get into a position of leadership if they have somehow managed to avoid making tough decisions all the way along?
Well, it's an excellent question, and I wish I had the answer, but it's really flawed promotional processes. Where we're picking people that know legislation, management roles and responsibilities, can quote policy, but they've never made a decision, never necessarily treated anybody the way they should, don't build morale, don't inspire, but they come to the boss with a piece of paper that says, look at the great job I did, boss, and the boss says, wow, you're a good person, you really got that done. Reality is they left a train wreck behind them. And we see that, but we don't necessarily test and evaluate for that. I know the current commissioner of the OPP's moving forward with some changes to that process, as we tried when I was there. It's a tough ship to turn around. But people that are afraid to make decisions then question why they didn't make promotion in some cases. And when you tell them because you never make a decision, it boggles their mind.
Well, let me follow up with this. There are, what are there, 50 police services in the province of Ontario?
Yes.
What percentage do you think are led by weak leaders who are afraid to make a decision?
Whoa, you're really putting me on the spot here, big guy.
Hello. Hello.
I don't know, maybe 10%.
Just 10?
Yeah, I don't really know. Some are stronger than others. And my opinion from afar may be not totally accurate. They may think I was a weak leader. I don't know. But you hear certain leaders talk, Steve, and they talk, everything is about them. It's about me, I. It's never about we, us, them. They take credit for things, and this goes through all organizations, not just police services, and all levels. They take credit for things they didn't do. And then they want to put their hand up and smile and say, oh, thank you, I thought it was a very good job that I did. Well, they weren't at the scene. They didn't handle the shooting. And people aren't stupid. They see that, and they know their bosses are taking credit for what they did and not passing on the sunshine.
I don't want to... I guess I don't want to be too critical here in some respects, because I wonder whether you can really blame people who are heading an organization that is absolutely in the crosshairs of so many people in our society today, including the media, who, if you screw up just a little bit, you are going to be a 60-point type headline in the, in every newspaper in the province the next day. I mean, that is enough to kind of put the fear into you of indecision, isn't it?
But it comes with leadership. If you don't want that, you don't want that responsibility, if you don't want to put your hand up when things go bad and say, hey, I'm the chief, or I'm the president or CEO, I'm the guy, blame me, then you shouldn't be in a leadership role. If you're going to point a finger and say, oh, they screwed it up, but don't worry, if I'd been there, it would have been okay. All the people below you are going to see that, hear that, lose respect and trust for you if they had it to begin with, and the organization's destined for failure. Morale will drop over things like that.
Well, let's name names. Who was a good leader that you worked for, that you liked, who was solid?
Well, I'll say it, Julian Fantino. Do we have our disagreements? Without a doubt. And I told him one time, there's days I want to kiss you and there's days I want to kill you. And sometimes I have both those emotions in the same hour. But he didn't take credit for things he didn't do himself. He didn't drag people behind a car because they made a mistake. He actually, there was forgiveness and things in Julian that the average person wouldn't have seen. Was he flawless? No, he wasn't. Am I? No, I'm not.
And he had a hell of a rough go in politics, too, when he got in.
Well, he did, for sure. But when he came to the OPP, a lot of people said, oh, we don't need an outsider. I think Julian helped us break some old habits and things that we always did. He was the first to shake hands and give people credit. His first day on the job, he was standing in Caledonia at the height of that, in uniform, wearing a gun belt, shaking hands and saying, I'm Julian Fantino. And he wasn't afraid to take on the tough issues or wear them
This was the land dispute over the housing development in Caledonia.
Exactly. It was one of the toughest times in the OPP.
Okay, can I get you to name a leader who you were less than enamored with?
I could name several. I won't.
Why not?
I'm not going to name names, throw people under the bus. One was a corporal I worked for early in my career who was the most hateful, bitter human being for some valid reasons, some not. He buried his son, and that was, that destroyed him. But he treated everybody awfully. He made you want to quit the job, including me. And I worked for a senior person many years later that was very hard on me and hard on many others. And if you weren't part of the little select few club, and this wasn't a commissioner. Some have said, oh, you're referring to a former commissioner. I'm not. But it was someone who had the ability to affect a lot of people and did in a very negative way. Unless you said, oh, yes, that's perfect. I totally agree. If you said, oh, hang on, let's talk about that, you were done like dinner. And that's not leadership.
Got a few minutes left here, and I want to take that time to, I want to come at you on a few things, okay? Because
I love it.
There are a few ironies in this book, I have to say.
Yep.
You've got Rudy Giuliani in here offering the advice of standing up to bullies.
Yep.
A bigger bully in politics you will never meet than Rudy Giuliani. Come on, Chris, you know that's true. You've got Giuliano Zaccardelli in this book, quoted quite in a quite complimentary fashion.
Yep.
His political intervention in what many thought was a completely inappropriate way may have cost Paul Martin the prime ministership of this country in an election against Stephen Harper because he intervened by leaking some information about an investigation of the Minister of Finance that some people thought, really handed a pile of turd to Paul Martin and helped Stephen Harper become prime minister of the country. Yeah. So why include them in a book that's supposed to be about positive leadership attributes? Well,
what they said was very positive, and I totally agree with what they said in those circumstances. The quotes from Zaccardelli, if you read the quotes or read what he's saying, it's tough to disagree with that. Is there another side that we don't know about, or maybe publicly has been aired but may or may not be entirely true? Without a doubt. I've got strong feelings about what happened to Zaccardelli, actually. Giuliani, some great quotes. I've seen a side of Giuliani since I wrote that book through the whole Trump train fiasco.
You're not on side with.
No, I'm not on side with at all. So I see that. And there are the things I've said and done that aren't necessarily, people say, oh, one time he did this or that in 36 years of working hard and trying and taking risks and doing your best. We all make mistakes at times. How we deal with those, how we own up to them, et cetera, is a different story. And in some cases, maybe Giuliani, for example, and maybe Zach. Things didn't work out.
Well, let me give you another one.
Yeah, sure.
You've quoted the Peel Region Police Chief Jennifer Evans in here.
Yep.
Chief Evans disobeyed a direct order from her board to end carding in Peel Region.
Yep.
Is that leadership or is that insubordination?
I think it was leadership. They don't have the ability to order her to do things like they ordered her to do. They can control her budget, they can control certain things. The board cannot tell the police chief to do X, Y, or Z in that fashion. She was right. She was very well covered off by a legal team that told her what she could and couldn't do. And I think Jennifer is one of the best chiefs in Ontario right now. I truly do. And will she make mistakes? Sure. There's a lawsuit on right now, an allegation she did certain things in relation to someone that was in the hospital after being wrongfully shot. Is a police chief going to see someone that's been shot by their officers and saying, I hope you're okay? Is that a bad thing? Now, SIU will say shouldn't have spoke to the officer. You can speak to officers in an SIU investigation. You just have to not talk about the incident. Same with victims in this case.
But let's be clear on this carding thing, because the province of Ontario has now put down an edict. It is new policy put down by the province of Ontario, the Attorney General, to end carding. The Peel Board came to the same conclusion. They're not supposed to do this anymore.
That's right.
And you're saying Chief Evans is right to push back.
That's right. She pushed back on the board, not on the province. Legislation is one thing, and regulations, etc., but the board telling her you can't do this or you can't do that is not right.
So if the province says, here's the new law, here's the new policy, then she has to.
She better. That's
then
right.
She better. Okay,
yeah.
I got it.
And that's the difference. And Jennifer will. She's not going to fight the province on that. I mean, very few police chiefs, if any, are happy with that regulation on carding. And we could have a whole show on that. Love to sometime. But ultimately, the board saying don't do it. Jennifer said, no, this is under review. We're going to continue business as usual. As every police department in the province did. Some may have abused that carding stuff or street checks, whatever you want to call it. Many didn't. And Jennifer took her stand, and good for her. I think that was leadership.
Okay.
It's never easy.
No, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Let's finish up on this. 3 decades in policing for you.
Yes.
Give us what you think is probably the best example of leadership you ever saw.
Myself excluded, obviously. No.
Not
okay,
necessarily.
I'll give you an example. And I think I talk about this in the book, but Larry Gravel was the chief of the Waterloo Regional Police. And Larry Gravel had an officer killed named Nicholson who died. He was a diver and he was killed trying to retrieve the body of a child. And at that funeral, I stood watching outside when all the people come out of the church. And normally the chief comes out followed by his or her troops, and they march down the street with the chief out in front. All the Waterloo Regional Police officers come out first, and they were followed by their boss, who was walking down the street with tears rolling down his cheeks. And I have a lot of respect for the man. And I talked to him later, and I said, you know, it was almost symbolic. It was like the shepherd making sure all the sheep got out safely. And he said, that's exactly what I was thinking. He wanted to be the last out of the church, not lead them, walk down the street like they're all followers. He was following them to make sure they got home safely, basically. And that really struck me at the time. And it's still with me, obviously, 20-some years later.
Interesting. Never Stop on a Hill is the name of the book. It's good advice in life as well. Chris D. Lewis, Commissioner, retired, Ontario Provincial Police. Chris, great to see you again. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Steve, and thanks for supporting the book. And the proceeds, of course, go to Special Olympics. So thank you on behalf of Special Olympics Ontario.
Right on.
Thank you, sir.
Help TVO create a better world through the power of learning. Visit TVO.org and make a tax-deductible donation today.